Okay, let's get to the football because I want to say it's an exciting weekend. I've already forgotten most of it, but I struggle to forget, obviously, Jose Mourinho's comments, that match by Napoli, Lorenzo Insigne's tears, which he's not really my favourite player, but I did kind of feel sorry for him. I also felt sorry for Spalletti. So obviously I'm talking about the game between Napoli and Roma that was in Naples. And this was an exciting match because Roma wanted the points to try to push Juventus and challenge for a top 4 position. Napoli obviously were still in the running for the Scudetto. A draw helps nobody except potentially Juventus and Milan in the end. Actually quite a lot maybe. But it was one of those games where we had everything. Was there a penalty? There was another shirt on show. There was some comments. Actually, there's a question that came in that we will answer while we are speaking. But I guess first things first, this was a game of 2 halves. If you didn't know, this is top-notch analysis. Yeah. But I did think Napoli were fantastic in the first half, and Roma were fantastic in the second half. So is this a battle that Jose Mourinho won in the second half with his adjustments and Spalletti lost with the substitutions? Was this a case of another mental problem? I'm going to start with you, Nicky. I'm going to let you take it away as to what your thoughts are on this match.
And first things first, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was one of those games. It's a big game that actually lives up to your sort of enthusiasm for it. I was looking forward to it. I was hoping it'd be a good game. As you've just sort of teed it up, Mina, Napoli 5th in the table. Roma 5th in the table, Napoli 3rd in the table, both of them with lots to play for. I think Roma as well, especially almost the timing of it, made it even more sort of fascinating on their end because Juventus had played beforehand and drawn. So actually Roma, if they won, could come to within 3 points of the top 4. And suddenly that was starting to look like a serious proposition because Roma had already gone out 11 games unbeaten before this. So to close within 3 points of the Champions League spaces with 5 games left to go, you start to think that could be real. So it was a loaded game that turned out to be a really fun game. And as you said it, almost 2 halves that were very different games. Because in the first half, I thought Napoli were great. I really thought they came out with exactly their sort of style of football. They had the possession, they had the tempo, they had most importantly, what they really had was to go with all that possession. They had incisive movement. I thought Mario Rui and Lorenzo Insigne were doing good things on the left. I thought that Hervé Lozano, who is such a disappointment to me so often and has been most of the time since he joined Napoli. I remember you and I, Mina, with Gab getting quite excited about that signing, and I don't think it's really panned out. But making really smart runs, including the one that leads to the penalty. And I think our producer, who might have some Roma leanings, disagrees with that penalty. I thought that was a clear-cut penalty. And yes, I thought that Lozano was playing for it. And I think if there hadn't been contact, he might have just ended up on the floor, which is not great. But in the end, he still got studs raked down his leg as he was going through. So for me, it's a penalty. So really sort of strong start from Napoli. But what's interesting is that even in that first half, I felt like Roma could have easily had the better chances in that half. Because Roma did...
In the first half?
Could have. They didn't have, but they could have had. The reason they didn't have was because in a couple of big moments, Zaniolo, who's just come off his amazing hat-trick in midweek, made bad decisions. I think after about 3 minutes, he was behind the defence down the right-hand side, and he should have played the ball square for Tammy Abraham. Maybe Pellegrini was there as well, and he doesn't play the ball. And then there was another situation, I think it was at 1-1, where he was it was one of those sort of, the ball's just been cleared. There isn't really like a team movement going on for Roma, but he kind of had him on the 2 Napoli centre-backs, and he beat them both. And he had them both on their heels, and he just needed to make the decision that time to keep the ball and go with it. And that time, unlike the first time where he didn't look up for the pass, he did look up for a pass that wasn't there. And I felt like, gosh, isn't this a little bit Zaniolo in a nutshell, that the talent is there, but sometimes the decision-making makes you want to take your hair out, because he could have set up a goal and scored a goal in that first half if he'd made the right decisions. But but still, it was a good first half for Napoli, maybe those moments aside. And then in the second half, I thought Roma played it really, really well. They came much back. They came back into the game with a higher press and not sitting in such a low block to begin with. And then, yes, they were invited into it by Spalletti's substitutions, and he took off everyone. He took off his whole attack. But nevertheless, they accepted that invitation, and yet again, they found a goal, which they just keep doing. I mean, you can't handle the Spalletti took off his whole attack.
I don't know. I'm just in a really giggly mood. He just took off his entire.
Well, he did. He took off Osimhen. He took off Insigne. He took off Fabian Ruiz, and he took off
yeah, you're right.
Lozano, all in 2 substitutions, 4 changes.
Okay, I'm going to do something just because I'm going to play devil's advocate here. So it's not necessarily what I believe, but I started to look at these substitutions because in my head, when I was watching the game, I was like, "Oh, you moron! Look what you've done. The team is falling so deep, they can't come out, they're not playing football, and obviously technique would defeat this type of, the type of run that Roma, I keep wanting to say Mourinho's team, yeah, but Roma were, it's amazing how much this guy imprints on his sides, yeah. But I was saying, the way to get out of this is to just start playing the Napoli way, just keep hold of the game, just keep possession, just pass it out. But then I started thinking about it, and it's okay, you did take off a lot of players, but you did bring on players that we really like as well, in the sense that Zielinski came on, Dries Mertens came on, Deme came on, which I thought was the right move considering Lobotka was now in problem. Elmas came on, so there is the ability. When he said they should have done better, the only one I disagreed with him bringing on was Juan Jesus, because I thought that was like a Juan Jesus, however you want to say it, sorry, yeah? Mm-hmm. For me, that was the most defensive change that he made. But the others made sense to me. When he said at the end of the day, they should have done better, I agree. They're good enough to be better in possession. So this is where I struggle to wonder, is this a mentality? Is this a tactical thing? At the end of the day, they were falling deeper and deeper. But I do agree with Spalletti in the sense that I didn't introduce guys that have never played football before. I've got Zielinski on there. I've got Dries Mertens on there. I've got Elmas on there. I've got Deme on there, who was considered the guy to put before Lobotka became, the star sensation at midfield that he is now. A lot of the time last year, Gattuso was relying on Deme. And so I don't understand how the team just kept falling away. And obviously we have to give credit to Roma because I think the adjustments were really good. I do agree with you in the sense that Zaniolo doesn't always make the right decisions. And I think, unfortunately, that is something that you get with youth, right? There are a lot of opportunities where sometimes they don't make the right decisions. And that is about coaching. It's about, I always go back to Ancelotti when he talks about Verratti and the things that used to annoy him so much at PSG, or like Vinicius Jr. when he arrived at Real Madrid said he would just take 17 touches. And I said, if you take 2 and can't take a shot, then pass the ball,
Yeah.
And it would be really nice to have sort of a little bit more of that coaching, maybe just say to Zaniolo, these are the principles you need to live by. But I think a lot of the time he gets used because he is so talented on the ball and because he can create problems and troubles that he is almost relied upon at his age. And I do, in that sense, feel a little bit sometimes sorry for him. But I also think that the tactics didn't help him. I think that he was pretty much isolated and he was the only driving force for Roma in the first half. And I would have liked to have seen somebody that just took a little bit of defensive attention away from him, which I didn't see happen. There needed to be a balance on the wings because it was all basically Zaniolo. And there wasn't sort of this man attracting all the attention away. So he had Koulibaly on him. He had the fullback on him. So it was just this constant of him trying to escape pressure. And I think that when you have that much attention, it makes decision-making that much harder when you're a youngster. But actually, what I like so much about this, and credit to Jose Mourinho, is the adjustments made in the second half. And I thought Mkhitaryan coming on, allowing for a more vertical position, but also possession of the ball, was such a great move. El-Shaarawy, for me, should have come on a little bit earlier. But again, these are the great moves that you make to balance it out. Offer Napoli so many different routes to defend that in the end, Zaniolo, had he not, suffered an injury, would have had a little bit more freedom to express himself and better decisions would have come out. But what I thought was that the attack now was a lot more balanced and not all dependent on just this one guy and what he can do. So I guess this is my feeling about him. So I don't know whether this is Roma's brilliance or Napoli's downfall or another mental collapse from Napoli. because, you know, again, I don't want to blame Insigne, but I think he did pretty well in this match. It's just a case of like, come on, like I brought in Zielinski, I brought in Demi, like none of you know how to keep hold of the ball. Like you're all so easily bullied. And this is where, like, there was just this brilliant question asked by a reporter that, you know, the sporting project from a financial point of view, Napoli have been a team that makes money, that has been well balanced, you know, that has slowly grown and become a side that is regularly in the top four of Serie A. Maybe not last season, but generally speaking. On a corporate level, it's perfect. But what is happening on a sporting level that this team really genuinely never look like title contenders? Mm-hmm. Why is that? What is the problem deep down that makes it that much difficult? And why is this team so easily bullied by any coach, even if they have Sarri, even if they've had Gattuso, Ancelotti, Spalletti, all very different coaches, all different ideas? It's still a team that's so easily bullied. Why?
Yeah, it is funny because Insigne, and maybe he could always have done more, right? But he certainly, for me, wasn't one of the people who let his team down yesterday. He scored the penalty. It was a really well taken penalty as well, by the way. It wasn't just like a, you know, stick it down the middle, got lucky penalty. It was right in the corner. It was a really well taken penalty, and that is the sort of thing that we've criticised him before as well for in the past. Sometimes he's in the big games, not always feeling those moments. Unfortunately now, every Italian who scores a penalty for the next 12 months, I think, is going to be cursed to have me sat there looking at them going, why didn't you do that for us in qualifying? Why wasn't it you? Why didn't someone get Jorginho out of the way and score a penalty? But it was a good penalty. And when the cameras came to him at the end of the game, I don't know if you saw it, Mina, but he sort of turns back towards the bench and he kicks a bottle. But the funny thing was that, like, I watched that moment and I thought, that doesn't look to me like someone who is feeling this all happening now. That looks to me like someone who is resigned to it. Like they felt this coming. And I suppose to an extent, the loss to Fiorentina last week already felt like the big thing, right? Like, and perhaps it shouldn't have, because perhaps this game, actually, if they'd won it, you know, they'd still be within 3 points at the top of the table. It would be more because of the tiebreakers being against them, but they would have been still there. They would have still been within that sort of touching distance. And I don't know. I think we've talked loads about Spalletti, and I think I would only be repeating myself, anything I could say about him, and my feeling that perhaps he's been the opposite of what they need in terms of, I think he always amps them up when sometimes they need to be dialed down. I think there are players there individually who I'm disappointed with. Zielinski, I talked about last time, has been one of them. Zielinski, I think, was so good at the start of the season, hasn't been recently, and unfortunately, again, I do tend to bring that back to Spalletti and put it on his doorstep. But I think Insigne is going to walk away from this moment with clearly huge regrets. It's written all over him, right? He's going to walk away from his last season at his boyhood club feeling like it could have been the most glorious send-off, like it could have been the biggest, sort of most amazing thing. But I think the whole club is going to leave this season racked with that sort of regret, because the fact is, it's just not that good of a Serie A season in terms of absolute quality at the top. It's been quite an entertaining season. It's been enjoyable. It's a close race. But there is not a team in this group that anyone's going to remember as a great team. And
I agree.
And in that season of all seasons, I think this Napoli squad, player for player, is good enough to be more. And I think that Spalletti ultimately carries the responsibility for that, even while I can accept what you're saying, Mina, that look, there's been Ancelotti there, there's been Gattuso there. Nothing that different happened. But I think that you can only judge each manager on a season-by-season basis. Maurizio Sarri didn't win the title, but he did something extraordinary with a group of players. He took them to 91 points. Ancelotti inherited a group that was sort of had some similarities there, and I think that was complicated because, you know, it's not easy to follow that job. Actually, it's not easy to take a group that someone else has taken to 91 points and carried on. He tried to change some things. I don't know, maybe he made wrong decisions, but I also think maybe he's not the right manager for that group. I think that Ancelotti is doing so well, in my opinion, with what he's got at Real Madrid, but I think part of that is his ability to just sort of take take all of the sort of brilliant players and remind them they're brilliant without having to necessarily hone everything in the way that Sarri had done. Gattuso, for me, has his limitations as a coach. I think he did some things better than he was given credit for, but he just isn't a great tactician. And Spalletti, sure, his tactics broadly, I think, are okay. Although I say that, and I often want to give him credit as a tactician, and I think he does some things very well. It's not easy with any group of players to hold possession as well as Napoli do. But I've been saying all season, if you're that good of a tactician, why do I always look at Victor Osimhen and think he's like apart from the rest of your team? Why don't I think he's part of the unit? So, yeah, unfortunately, well, you can sort of write the story that it's every manager the same story. To me, it's still a Spalletti issue.
Look, there's been a lot of discussion this week about who is a good tactician and who isn't. I'm like on several WhatsApp groups, and it's usually me arguing with a bunch of journalists about whether or not Ancelotti is a good tactician or is Spalletti a good tactician. And those have been a major topic for our chat group in the last week. You know, for me, there are a few things in football that I don't forget, like Tele Santana's Brazil in 1982. You know, like these are the type of like coaching and styles of play that, you know, really stick with you. And Spalletti, his Roma with Totti as a false number 9 is just something that I thought was magnificent. You know, it was magnificent. And I feel like after that, I've always thought of him as being this amazing coach. But I think that what we always fall is that we think it's either you value a coach a lot or you don't value a coach a lot. But coaching is so much more than just a guy with a great bunch of tactics and patterns of play. Because if it is only that, then Pep Guardiola would have won everything, right, in the last few years. But as it stands, ever since he left Barcelona, he's reached only one final. And this is despite spending billions and having some of the best players at Bayern and Manchester City. He's only reached one final with both of those squads, you know. And I think that goes to show that football is more than just tactics. It is also about developing leaderships and leaders and having like management on board that is helping you to sort of live out what it is that you're trying to achieve and working together as a stable unit. It is also having the right conditioning. That could be physical conditioning, that could be mental conditioning. One of the reasons why Italian football for me is and remains in my head when it comes to the details the very best is because it did focus on every detail. It was always about that extra 10% that you can put that maybe others don't have. It's the extra 10% is the better scouting. Extra 10% is the better conditioning. You know, at the end of the day, Ventrone, who's with Antonio Conte right now, Antonio Pintus, who's with Carlo Ancelotti right now. These were all guys that came from Italian football. You know, Atalanta, I always forget his name, but their fitness coach, won all their rewards because of the remarkable fitness that they had over the last few years. Obviously, now there are question marks being asked because they've suffered so many injuries, but it's always that extra. What can you do more? What are the details that you do more? And with Napoli, that's why I say that it can't be the coach because they can't be experiencing this many problems all the time. So is it obviously we don't know everything, right? So is it a psychological issue? Is there too much being asked of a coach to do? Because, you know, here's an interesting thing. So one of our Chronicles Tifosi members actually asked a question, and he says, on the BT commentary last night for the Napoli versus Roma, so he's obviously in the UK, Dave Farrar, who was the commentator, mentioned that Aurelio Delaurentis was looking at downgrading the budget for Napoli after the season. Any more details on that and what that would mean as far as challenging for top 4? And that's from Simon Smith. I guess just before I throw this to you, you know, that's just one more thing that, you know, it's interesting because it was also like put to Spalletti about how upset De Laurentiis is when he doesn't make the right substitutions at the right time. Is too much being asked. Yeah,
that was a fascinating little sort of reveal, wasn't it, from Spalletti, like making it sort of clear that De Laurentiis is obviously in his ear a lot. I've said before on the podcast that I think that Napoli is a club that is not well run behind the scenes, and I think that filters through. I do actually. I think it's harder to succeed in Naples, and I think that's got layers to it because in some regards it's very well run. I mean, Aurelio Delaurentis in a league where people are often doing a terrible job of managing their books and turning profits, has been very, very consistent at keeping Napoli not spending beyond their means. And that's impressive to do that and continue to be in the top part of the table. But I think they also have just not modernised. They have just not modernised in the way that you see a club like Juventus did first, that you see a club like Milan has been doing recently and getting results on the pitch for it. You see that Inter have gone through and are getting better results for it, that I think Roma are trying to do. And I think that refusing to embrace modernity over time is going to cost you. And I think that's part of the story with Napoli. As for the question, again, Delaurentis has never been Moratti at Inter. He's never been here to throw €1 billion at something and say, it's okay, it's my plaything. He's always tried to run the club, well, sort of taking some glamour from it and being like, I'm a film producer. He's always tried to run it as a sustainable business. And I think after COVID, that's more complicated than ever. So I think there's a very real chance that he will look to extricate himself from the club in the next year or two. That's been talked about already. But if he doesn't, then for certain he's going to be looking to make sure he doesn't end up hugely sinking himself financially for it. And that could mean big sales, like, for instance, the most obvious one, Victor Osimhen is the most saleable asset on that team, which would be catastrophic from the point of view of whether or not they can compete at the top end of Serie A. But we shall see. I know our producer is going to go absolutely potty if we don't move on very, very soon, but we have talked a lot about this game and not talked about Mourinho. I just want to say this
I agree with you.
has to be said, something about Mourinho. Yes. Because 12 games unbeaten and clearly in his element at the end of the game, having a go about the refereeing decisions, which I've already mentioned the big one, but I also think that I think he was right, and all he could have been sent off. But before the game, going to give leaf flowers at Maradona's shrine as well in Naples, I just, I think we just have to acknowledge it. We've had times we've been down on Mourinho, but as I think our old friend Gab was always fond of saying, when the facts change, the story changes, and the facts have changed. Mourinho's doing well there now.
He is, in all honesty, just his tactical adjustments in the second half for me, the fact that he noticed about how much balance there needed to be in attacking play, and the fact that he adjusted quickly rather than waiting, till the 70th, 80th minute, I thought that was remarkable. I do think sometimes he puts himself in a position where then you think to yourself, when he's like, this was Everest for us coming to Napoli, after playing, Bodo Glimt. God, if anyone heard you, you're talking about playing Liverpool, it is Bodo Glimt. You've given them the allure that they probably didn't deserve. It's still Bodo Glimt, dude. But you're right. It is 12 games. It is tactical adjustments. It is a team that really is fighting aggressively, pushing well. It is scoring goals when it needs to. You're seeing players that are, I guess, developing. I mean, the fact of the matter is that more than anything, I'm not going to talk about players developing, or I'm not going to talk about all the tactics. I am going to talk about one thing. The mentality has changed, and that was the Roma desire, right? That was the whole point of bringing in Jose Mourinho, is because you want the never say die attitude. And to be honest with you, they've got 7 goals now in injury time, 15 in the last quarter of an hour of the games. That is remarkable. That is something that we used to applaud Simone Inzaghi for at Lazio. But it's this guy right now doing it, which means Roma believe until the very, very end. And credit to him, because I feel like we haven't talked about that. When it comes, though, to the rest of the stuff, sometimes he says it's a little outlandish. But don't we all love the drama about it all?
I just think, Mina, because we'll have more chance to talk about it next week. They're going to Inter, of course, next week, which is, homecoming for Jose. Last time, obviously when Jose won the treble, last Italian team to win in Europe was Inter. Now he's got a chance to be the next Italian team to win in Europe at a slightly lower level. Conference League is not the Champions League, but still. I just think it's so wonderfully Jose that even though he's not going to win the title this season, somehow he's managed to put himself back in the centre of the Serie A narrative. I just think that's the most Jose thing that could happen, really, going into that game against Inter.